Yes, this is my pleasure to introduce my friend and a colleague. He is a missionary in his heart, and he spent a few years here in the Philippines serving as a missionary, as a teacher, as a school principal and administrator in the island of Mindoro. He is originally from Germany, and now he is living and working in Switzerland. He has his wife and children. Christian, I believe 2 children. I remember.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And yes, he earned his BA in theology at Bogenhofen Seminary, Austria in 2002. Then a main ministry at IS in 2004. And recently he just defended his dissertation. I believe it was last May this year. So he is newly just recently graduated from IS seminary with the Doctor in Ministry degree. And his topic will be on reaching leadership by influence in tribal communities, a case study of the Iraya Mangyang in Occidental Mindoro, Philippines. And we are eager to learn about this study. This is a very interesting study. And as I said, this is a missionary experience. So we would like to learn from you, Dr. Christian. Now the time is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation of AQRA to be part of your seminar. Greetings from Switzerland. It's 11 a.m. here and still beautiful weather, but I miss the Philippines. But in the topic today, I want to bring you to the Philippines. I had the privilege of living in the Philippines for several years. 5 years of those I lived in Mindoro, which is the island south of Luzon, and I had the privilege to work with different native tribes. The past interaction was with an institution called Katatubo Excel School. Katatubo is another word for native, and this school has the purpose of educating young people, tribal people, and help them that they can influence the community to the better. However, the problem was that this institution existed already several years and the outcome in leadership was not yet present. And so the problem I was looking in my study to was, how is the correlation of Casey education and the influence of the graduates and the students towards their tribal setting and communities? I had several purposes while I was studying it. One was to understand tribal community in general. What does it mean to be a tribal leader? What are characteristics of it? But also to develop a model. How could Casey students help how could we help Casey students that they become leaders, that they gain an influence, and then also to help the institution itself to have a bigger awareness of the culture and the situation the students are from. As I said, I was able to live on that island, and that was very important for me because it helped me to emerge into the setting. I was able to visit the island, the tribal villages several times. I have personal relationships with them, and that was very important for a foundation of the research in general. In my studies, I had several assumptions, I have to admit. One was that Casey intentionally is developing leaders, but actually we discovered that's not the case. So it's actually not intentional. Then also that through the Casey philosophy, there is the assumption that quality education leads automatically to become a leader. And this was also part of the study. And the third one was that when a student returns to his village, he would automatically change and develop the country or the community, sorry. I had 2 research questions. Basically, I know usually you should have 3 or more, but it's narrowed down to 2 main questions. One was, what is the understanding of leadership in the Iraya communities, as well as among the Casey High School students? And the other one was, how can high school students exert an influence and extend help to their tribal communities? Oh, thank you, the presentation is coming. So these were the, yes, the problem, the purpose, exactly. The assumptions, let's go on to the next one. There were the research questions, yes. And now let's come to the methodology, which is probably exciting and interesting for most of the members of AQRA. I used the model of a case study because it's a unique case we are talking about. We have a specific people group and we have a specific institution, and so there was a certain case. On the other hand, it was also exploratory, which means there was no research done before and it was unsure where it would lead. I really had to dig in and try to gain the resources and the information from wherever possible to connect it and to get a picture. Why did I choose the qualitative approach? Well, everybody who studied a little bit about qualitative and quantitative research will probably agree that qualitative research is best for social science. And since the focus of my study was ethnological people group, the qualitative approach was the best. I could dig in, I could interview, I could talk to the people, I could observe, and with all of these informations, the picture became more relevant and authentic. For my data collection, I used in-depth interview, I used focus group interview, I used the literature I was able to find, I used observations, and several other personal talks I had. After collecting my data, of course, I had the transcription, which I did myself to ensure the anonymity and the integrity that the data is only handled by myself. Then came the coding. And after the coding, I did also a cross-case display, which means I looked at the answers of one group of participants, in that case, the students, and the other group, which were adults, teacher, parent, elders, authorities in the village. And I compared their answers to the same questions and was checking, are there similarities or are there completely different understandings? For the validation, I had triangulation of the different sources I used. And again, I had the personal talks where I used my findings and discussed with the students and tried to understand, am I on the right track or is my understanding wrong? The study took place in Mindoro. Mindoro is a beautiful island. It has 9 native tribes. You can read the names there. When you look into literature, you can find that Mindoro, about 900 AD, Mindoro is mentioned in the southern part, the Hanuno tribe, which is also the most developed tribe on that island. And then about 1225, it's mentioned again by the Chinese, who were merchants and who were working and having business with Mindoro. And then later, when the Spaniards came, it's also mentioned in several sources, the island of Mindoro and also the city of Mamburao, which is on the west coast, north west coast where I was located. The 9 tribes are there. However, the statistics of the tribes is not so clear. You find many resources. Some speak about 100,000. The latest from the National Commission of Indigenous People in 2016 listed 24,000 registered Catatubos in Occidental Mindoro. But because these Catatubos live remote in the mountains, many of them are not counted in the census. So I'm sure the number is much higher. The participants of my research were all 7 Catatubo high school students in the school year 2018-19. The limit of my students was actually the amount of general students we had. I had interviews with all students. Then I had tribal parents, elders, leaders, judges, an alumnus, an administrator, and also I had 1 teacher. So a total of about 15 people. They came from different villages. Catatubo Excel School operates schools in 4 villages. And we had persons from all 4 villages. We had male and females. And we had the age range from 15 to 80 years. So I tried to be as diverse as possible to ensure that we get a real picture of the situation. Maybe a little word about the Iraya Catatubo in general. They have dark skin, black hair, oftentimes curly hair with small round or oval faces. That's also out of literature, but it's true. Before, when I came first in 1999, they really wore the G-strings. Today, not so much. Staple food is rice, of course. They also grow it on the mountain slopes. They have sweet potatoes, they have other root crops. They move wherever they have the fields, so they are semi-nomadic. Before early, like 17th century, 18th century, they were hunters. Today, unfortunately, there's not much in the forest left to hunt, so they changed to become fishers and farmers. Oftentimes, they marry early. We have students in the schools, in Catatubo Excel School, who got married at age of 12 and 13, and immediately they would have children. And families with 10 children or more are common. The hygiene is low. There's a lot of sickness, hepatitis, tuberculosis. Many years ago, when I was there the first time, there was also malaria and other things. The Iraya language, which identified them also, is unfortunately lost. So many people speak Tagalog. And speaking about their beliefs, they are animists and Christians at the same time, which we theologians define as syncretism, which means both existing at the same time. The following picture you see, I found in Sablayan. When you go there to the marketplace, you can see it, and it shows a little bit the history of the Philippines and the Catatubos in general. On the left side, you have the Chinese as they came as merchants, and they worked with the natives, and you see the primitive style of the natives. Then you had the lowlanders who came and developed more. You had then the Japanese occupation, the war, which was also hard in Mindoro, and the picture actually continues to the present time. The Catatubos, unfortunately, they experienced a lot of fear. They were also oppressed, and that makes it hard to really open up to outsiders. They are shy people, very peace-loving people, but it's hard to really build up the trust. Catatubo Excel School is the institution I was working with before I conducted my study. And during my study, I focused completely on the study to avoid a bias that people would answer in favor because I might be employed there, so I try to avoid it. First, it was founded in 2004 as Manyan Exalt School, which was later remained because the word Manyan, under which term the tribes are known in the Philippines and also in Mindoro, is oftentimes a term which puts the native tribes down. It could also mean like dumb, dirty, and that's not the case. They just have different possibilities to grow, but they are not dumb at all. So we renamed it into Katatubo Excel Schools. There are the 4 villages. You can see it on the map. They are all on the west side of the island, the northern west side, where the Irayan tribe occupies the land. And there is one senior high school, which is also boarding school, and that's where my research took place most. The vision of Katatubo Excel School says, Casey envisions the day when educated and trained Christian Katatubos will be active ambassadors for Jesus in their communities. And you can see there are several aspects already. The first thing is educated. Why is education important? One example, a girl got bitten in the village by a dog, and the parents were afraid that the dog had rabies and could infect the girl, that it might die. And so they told the girl, first they killed the dog, and then they told the girl, you have to eat the brain of the dog so that nothing can happen to you health-wise. And the girl said, I don't want to. And the parents and the elders, they insisted so long until the girl had no other choice than to really eat the brain. And there are other examples like that, which shows that education is needed for these people. They have so many superstitions and beliefs that they need to learn that there's more. Also, the vision of Casey includes Christianity. And that's another aspect. As I said, Katatubos live in fear of other people. They were always oppressed, if it was the Spaniards, the Muslims later, the Japanese. They were always oppressed, and so they live in fear. But they live also in fear of the spirits, and that makes it hard for them to see a meaning in life, to see a purpose, and not to just take everything as it's fate, I cannot change anything anyway. So as much as I like the vision, the question still remained, how can that vision really become true? Therefore, I had interview questions. I don't have them here in the PowerPoint, but I will give them to you so that you get an idea. The first part about understanding the leadership structure of the community, I was asking simple questions like, why are people considered leaders in your village? Or what is the role of a leader in your community? What are important characteristics in a leader for you? And it was interesting how these interviews took place. Some were outside sitting on the ground, others were in a native hut, some were also in a classroom. It was quite interesting, and it always took a moment before the natives were willing to speak up and to share. And then, of course, follow-up questions followed to understand more. Some of the people could speak English, others could not speak English. That was a challenge, I have to admit. To find a translator who translates what you say is not always easy, but I think we managed well. And in all the interviews I had, there developed a relationship with the people. And that was nice. I remember the interview of the judge. He was an old man, and he had beads around his neck, and he had still a G-string on, and his wife was next, but she would not talk. And we had an open discussion, and he would share from his wisdom and his experience. And from this research question about the community understanding of leadership, I discovered the theme authority, the theme personality, and the theme knowledge. Authority could be then categorized into age, kinship, and position. Age means the elders in the village, they are the ones who are respected, who have authority, who are asked, and who are not, or it's not possible to object what they say, like you can see in the example of the girl, which I shared earlier. The second category is kinship. In especially one village, it was very important that you belong to the same family. It was handed down in that family. And then the third one was about position. The Catatubos, they are influenced by the lowland structure of positions, of the LGU positions. And so they have kind of two styles of leadership: the old leadership of elders and the new leadership of councillor, mayors, tanot, the police, and so on. And so these are alongside existing. The theme 2, in the personality, there was more the focus on the capability. The work of the leaders is mostly problem solving, but not everybody is able to solve the problem or to entertain visitors who are coming, or to represent the village in front of the barangay, for example. And so that was one challenge and one of the categories. The other category is the performance. How would they perform? And it was interesting that because the problem solving was one of the main focus points, seldom you could observe initiative of the elder or the leader, like, oh, let's do something, let's improve. There was seldom an initiative. And for the other villagers, it was not so allowed to take an initiative because the elder needs to be respected, and otherwise you would interfere with this. The third theme was then, in the knowledge, was category 6, wisdom and experience. The elders are supposed to have the most experience and wisdom, and that's why they were asked and the council was followed. Then the category education is a category which is more from the newer development. In Oriental Mindoro, which is the west side, there are some Catatubos who finished already a BA in education and in other areas. And especially in researches there, it shows how education lifts up a community and becomes important among the Catatubos for influence. And then the last category was the representation of representing the village in front of outsiders. The second research focus was of understanding the leadership concept among the high school students and among the communities. And for that, I had different questions for the students as well as for the villagers. But basically it all was like, okay, why are people considered leaders? Or what is the role of a leader? What are important characteristics for a leader for you? And how did the leaders approach you, or villagers approach you for the students? Or are they treating you differently now that you have an education? And there we came then to one theme actually, and I see I forgot to type that in, and that theme is labeled influence. Basically, leaders are supposed to influence their surrounding. And the influence which is there, and the influence the Catatubo students can bring to their villages through their lifestyle, how they live, how they plan ahead, how they have food in Kiriwi in hungry season. It's about education, oh, they can speak Tagalog, oh, they can understand a letter or write something, they can interact with officials. Then the category of advice, they have broad knowledge, they can understand connections, they can relate topics. And then also the last one, the spirituality, where they immediately saw, oh, the students coming back from Katatubo Excel schools, they are not so in fear of spirits anymore. They have a different understanding of faith. They are even willing to speak up to things. So this was all under the themes and research questions. What is very important in this study is the next slide. You have to understand the culture. Honestly, I was not so much aware of this when I started my studies. I thought, oh, I lived several years already in that community. I know enough. I understand very little, limited Tagalog, but it's okay. But I think we truly have to understand the culture of the Katatubos, because the culture impacts what people do, why people do it, and how people do it. And the pyramid you see on the side, that's one I developed during my dissertation, which has the worldview as the foundation, the worldview of what we feel, what we think, what we do. And then build on that are values we have, criterias, and these criterias, they evaluate the world around us. For example, oh, I'm only a Katatubo, so I can never excel or exceed to a better status than I have. And then the beliefs, they describe, oh, that's the truth. Like when somebody comes, a teacher, and says, oh, you can do it, he thinks, oh no, my value is I'm Katatubo, I'm dumb, I cannot. And so you see immediately the problem the students were in. And then the behaviors, they describe the actions. For example, Katatubos, they are shy. When they walk on a road, they walk single file, even though the road is wide, because that's how they are used. They will not look into your eyes when they speak with you, if they speak at all. So to understand the culture is crucial in order to really be able to understand their leadership style and to be able to impact their communities. I'm glad that Dr. Bawagan, she is now at University of the Philippines, Diliman. She had a study about the Irayas, and she made a pyramid, that's on the next slide, where she shows the fundamental inner core of the Irayan culture, the supplement middle layer, and then the survival outer core. And as you can read it yourself, you will see there are several areas which are very inside, like we are Irayan, we will remain Irayan, we are there. That's our territory, that's our identity. And then it widens up. For example, the language, traditional practices, arts, unfortunately, most of it is lost. Only few people speak the language. And it's interesting, some of the elder people, they say, oh, I'm not teaching you the Iraya language, because if I teach you, I lose it because I pass it on. And so the young people, they don't know it. Or art, how to make baskets, how to do handicrafts and other things. They unfortunately unlearn it, or they are not taught it anymore. And then outside the survival core, that has more to do like, how can we feed ourselves? How can we survive in our village settings? All of this. In the next slide, you can see the result I came up to in my study, which is basically a contextualized leadership model. As I said, the fourth theme was influence, and I discovered you can only influence the Katatubo community through a personal example. When a student goes back and lives among them, he will be observed. That's what everybody mentioned, the teachers, the students, and as well as the villagers. And by the example of the students, the example through the personality and character, through the knowledge and education, through the lifestyle and capability, it's possible to exert an influence and to start a change in the community. Let me go a little bit deeper on the next slide on the areas of influence. Personal and spirituality, what I mean was this is like the character of the KC students, the attitude towards the villagers, towards their culture. It's not easy when you go there and you see how they do things and you think, oh, another way would be better, and still hold back and say, well, I just accept them how they are, but I do it different and let them see the different outcomes of it. And with this curiosity is starting and something opens up. Instead of saying, oh, what you do is wrong, you will not win them. The same thing with practical Christianity or lifestyle performance. Set an example how you do your hygiene, that you have a toilet where you go to and you are not sick so often, that you have food because you planned ahead for the hungry season, that you plan the garden around your house, that you wash your clothes frequently because you want to look neat. And also your willingness, how are you interacting with your neighbors? Are you open? Are you willing to help them? And the knowledge and education, before you can teach the adults and the elders, they want to observe how you interact with the children. Is what you say, is it helping the young children? Does it make sense? And then maybe in a personal talk, when they talk with you, are you putting them down or not? There was a story of one Irayan who came back to the home village, not from Katatubo Excel School, from another school. And when the students arrived home, the students said, oh, I'm not willing to sit on the dirt floor anymore. I'm educated. And with this behavior, the relationship was broken. And the villagers said, oh, it's not one of us anymore. And that's an obstacle the students will face. How can we show them that we accept the villagers, even though we are different, and that we are not judging them, but that we just show a different style? And through a relationship, an influence can start like the water drop, which slowly, not automatically, but which slowly expands and goes deep. The next slide. The significance of the research, I believe, is first to have a deeper analysis of the leadership structure of the Irayan, then the development of the water drop contextualized leadership model, then also an analysis and recommendation for Katatubo Excel schools, how they can be more intentional in preparing their students. And also in my dissertation, I made an overview and categorized the available literature I found in the Philippines, that the next researchers will have it a little bit easier to know where to go to and what is able to find. My time is running, so I will jump over the recommendations. Well, no, let's read it also. The recommendations are, of course, specific for that case. So we cannot use it in general everywhere. But what I discovered is that it's important to build and create a relationship with deep trust. As I said, the Katatubos are shy from their personality, and it's important that they can feel the trust to open up, to be accepted. And with the trust is also one of the main things I think is important is the one-on-one coaching. I did that with the graduates of Katatubo Excel schools. And one graduate, he is now in Batanga State University studying secondary education, majoring in English. And he was in a class and the professor spoke about the natives of Mindoro. And he spoke about how they are behind and how they are poor and dirty and so on. And in the second time the professor was talking about that, he finally reached out his hand and told the professor, well, I am one of those. And then he shared his personal experience. When I heard that, I was so proud of this student to be able and mature enough to speak up and say that he is a Catatumbo and what are his experiences. I was very proud of him. We had another student in Philippine Normal University in Manila. Unfortunately, he decided to drop out. He was not able to cope with it. The final words, what I want to pass on to everybody who hears about Catatubos or Manyans is, the world for the Catatubos and Manyans, it's changing dramatically. They are losing their identity, their language, their arts, their crafts. They are losing their land, their forest is cut down, and it's a challenge to provide enough food, and they are in the danger of spiritual syncretism. However, Catatubos are very valuable people and citizens of the Philippines. They are friendly, diligent, honest, and peace-loving. Yes, they feel inferior and shy towards outsiders, but once you win their friendship, it's great. And so I believe that we need spiritual, educated, and dedicated leaders among the Catatubos who can help their community to face the 21st century and to have a future. Thank you for listening to my fast presentation, and I'm happy to hear your questions and try to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Dr. Christian, for interesting presentation. I would be eager to know, to learn a little bit more about your observation experience. Well, I was in your dissertation committee, but it is very important, I think, in this kind of ethnographic studies where you explore basically the new culture, and you're an outsider of that culture. How did you do the observations? How was it helpful for your study? If you can just share a few words on that. Thank you.
Well, that was a very humbling experience for me, because I made the observation guide outline on the paper, and I had all my questions and then the extent to which it might be applicable. And when I used it in the surroundings I determined before, I discovered it's not usable. The mindset I developed it with was my Western mindset and not the cultural mindset of the Catatubos. For example, I had like, how are the students willing to take initiative from themselves to start something or to train somebody else? And I discovered that was my Western mindset, but that's not in a Catatubo, because initiative is only by the elders and by the older people. So honestly, I had to put my research guide aside and had to say, open your eyes, open your ears, and observe what really happens. Observe how the students are interacting among themselves, just open-minded. Observe when you sit down in the interview and see what happens between the wife and the husband, what happens when a child comes in, and all of these things. And so my observations were more unstructured, but wider, I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much. So that was also adjusting during the
Very
process.
much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. We have many questions from several questions from our participants. So we may now give some time to Dr. David to entertain those questions. Thank you. Well, we have. Yes, please, Dr. David, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yes, very interesting presentation, Pastor Stroeck. And there are many questions here. I think there are about 8 or 9. I don't know if we can entertain them all, but let's see. We'll go through them one by one, and whenever Dr. Arceli stopped us, then that's the time we stop.
We can have 10 minutes.
Okay. So yes, this is one from an anonymous attendee. He or she does not want to be named here. Was asking, how did you address ethical considerations in your study?
That's a very good and important question. First, of course, my whole research question and approach was going to the ethical research committee in IAS and had to be approved. And there was a fine line because I was so much involved with Catatumbo Excel schools before, there could be a pressure among the participants to see, okay, we have to answer in his favor. And for me it was, and we have to answer at all. And so for me it was important to tell the participants, I'm not in any authoritative power during my research, and I did not get into the work with Catatumbo Excel schools after either. So I tried to make a distinction between my work before and now the research. However, I have to admit, I'm a white person. I'm a respected person in their community. And I was glad when one person said, I don't want to participate. And I immediately accepted that. I did not ask at all. And the funny thing was, at the end of that research, or of that interview, it was in the focus group, the person said, oh, may I also add something? And I said, of course, yes. He did not sign the consent form, which I always gave before. But then at the end, he still wanted to say something. And I immediately accepted that. I'm also happy that I received some critical answers about the schooling of Catatumbo Excel School. And that was also important for me. Also, I did not only interview people who were related to Catatumbo Excel School, so I interviewed villagers who had nothing to do with Catatumbo Excel School. And that was also important for me to get representative answers and not just in favor. But yes, it's not easy to work when the people know you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Doctor. So this is a good question from Mr. Gerald. What is the most compelling reason for you to conduct this study? And maybe if you can add on how may the results of your study provide some benefits in the policymaking of the affected indigenous groups.
The reason why I did that was I observe Catatumbo Excel School since 1999. So 20 years before I did my research, I had the first encounter with them. And I think they are doing a good job in giving education to the natives, but I did not see the change in the communities or in the villages. And so I said, how come? How is that possible? There must be reasons. I recommended my dissertation to the administrator and to the teachers, the current teachers of Catatumbo Excel schools, and I said, please look into it, read it, and maybe there are some keys for you to think about it. I just know for myself that it opened up my mind, especially to the cultures of the natives. And when I came with my results to the high school graduates and tried to validate it, they said, wow, yes, you understand. And I discovered how my interaction with them changed. And I just hope and pray that the teachers and administrators will have a similar experience and can be more focused and more effective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, what was the research gap that led you to choose leadership as the case and the boundary in a geographical context of the indigenous people?
Well, if you look at the model of change, how can change happen? And I experienced that myself when I was a missionary in 1999 to 2000 with a different organization. It's easy to have a change on the surface. Like you come and you hand out seeds for calabaza instead of rice, and they will grow calabaza. But after that, they will grow rice, even though they earned more on calabaza. So it's only changed because you enforced it, kind of. You brought it. And that's not a long-lasting change. And I believe only through a leadership who can influence down to the families, to the community, long-lasting change can happen. And that's why I chose leadership as the research gap and as the focus. The boundary, I discovered, as I said, 1999, I lived with another tribe, even with the Alangan tribe, which is south of the Irayan. And each tribe is different and has different kinds of housing, different kinds of leadership structures. In my research, I went through all the different tribes and analyzed a little bit of it. And I discovered I need to focus on one tribe. Otherwise, it will not be applicable. It's too wide. And that's why I chose the Irayan, which are the main students in Katatubo Excel School. There are also some students from other tribes, but the main students are Iraya.
Thank you. I think that
We
was
have
a clear...
3 minutes, David.
All right. This one maybe is a nice question. How is it different from an ethnographical approach? I believe I asked you this question offline, but I think many here are wanting to ask the same question.
Well, I think the attendee is very aware of it, that it's actually ethnographic in one kind of the nature, because I studied deeply into the Irayan community. On the other hand, it's also missiological through the contextualized leadership model I developed, which means how can we now help them and move on? So it's kind of a mix of both. That's true.
2 more minutes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The question is, in your finding, how is this different from other or existing leadership theories?
I looked into different leadership theories, Christian leadership theories, general leadership theories, but when you study the leadership theories, you find out that all of them, or most of them, let's be on the safe side, are based on a Western mindset. They were developed by Americans, by Europeans, but not so many are based on the Asian mindset, and not at all on a tribal mindset. And that's why I said, oh, we need to look into a tribal leadership concept. And I tried to work it out through the categories and the themes in my first research question, and then use the culture base for my contextualized leadership model.
Well, do we still have time?
Yeah, 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. Maybe this is a reflection, maybe on your reflection on the part of your research. What are your realizations after conducting this research?
I realized that even though I lived among them for several years, I did not fully understand them. I did not listen enough to them. I did not observe enough in the past. I thought I knew it, and I did not. And this research helped me to understand more. And I see the challenge also for the students, how it is for them to come back. They change themselves so much in their years in the boarding school, being around Western people, being around a different faith, in that case, Christianity, getting education, higher education, and then they come back to their village setting, and it's two worlds. And the same thing I experienced in my research, and I think we have to help these young people so much more to be at their side one by one, that they can bridge the gap and can be accepted in their community and still make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's all the time we have for question and answers. Back to you, Dr. Asani.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Arceli, and the rest of the AQRA team for the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Amyll B. Olano. She was a former lead foreign teacher of Lanshan International Kindergarten in Shifeng City, Inner Mongolia. She was also a former professor of the Philippine Normal University Mindanao campus, where she taught professional education, language, and literature courses. She has been invited to talk on topics such as curriculum and pedagogy, reading and positivity in the workplace. She earned her doctor in philosophy in English with specialization in language at the University of San Jose Recoletos, Cebu City, Philippines. She is particularly interested in research covering social problems and public policies. Presently, she is the managing editor of Scribe at Ibapa, a Philippine-based editing firm and education consultancy. For further knowledge and ideas about her study on critical discourse analysis on the utterances of the legislatures of the Philippine local government units, please help me welcome Dr. Josilu Amyll B. Olano.
Okay, I just want to check my audio. Is it clear?
Yep.
Before that, let me tell you a story. From 2 p.m. until 5:42 today, we have no electricity. There was an unscheduled maintenance. I have to be on Zoom at 4:30. I was sad and nervous at the same time, but I'm still very hopeful. And true enough, the power was restored at exactly 5:42 p.m. today. And here I am. I think that's one thing we have to deal with this new normal. But God is indeed amazing because He heard my prayers. This is indeed a test of faith. So I can contain my happiness because I'm here today. Now let me share my screen. Um, okay. All right. Firstly, my gratitude to the Asian Qualitative Research Association, to the President, Dr. Arceli Rosario, to all of the hardworking individuals in AQRA. A special mention to my mentor, Dr. Leo Aberion, for this opportunity, and to everyone who is present in this virtual conference. Good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here. Language allows one to take on different socially significant identities where one can speak as an expert. Politics is not just about contending political parties, but it is also about the distribution of social goods in society. And since language is used, social goods and their distribution are always at stake. In a deep sense, we can say that language is always political. The linguistic dilemma, however, of miscommunication is when the speaker fails to produce the intended effect, or when the hearer cannot recognize what the speaker intends to communicate, or both. The occurrence holds factual to the barangay, municipal, and provincial assemblies of the local government units. That is why this evening I will be sharing critical discourse analysis on utterances of the legislatures in the Philippine local government units in attempt to establish the flow of communication from different units and how are these translated that would best serve the community. Coordinating policies among officials is a very challenging thing to do. It is a point of argument that the more the localities do cooperatively, the less need there is for state intervention in local affairs. According to the government communication and information system, in order to enhance democracy and promote a better life for citizens, it is imperative that the communication function in government is seen as an integral element of governance and service delivery. Public engagement is an umbrella term that encompasses numerous methods for bringing people together to address issues of public importance. Sense of responsibility is a holistic approach which enables the transformation of bureaucratic and professional government service to transparent, professional, and efficient public service that engendered pride, transparency, and social equity. The organizational practices of government personnel are central to building public trust and confidence, and it cannot be denied that work ethics and organizational culture prevailing in the local government unit are a reflection of public sector performance, which in turn creates an impression on how a particular government office performs. Meaningful participation through assemblies by public servants raises quality of governance. Sustained public engagement ensures a better sense of responsibility and develops a culture of accountability, which drives better service delivery and more responsive performance from the officials or from our officials. As you can see here, this is the flow chart of the government system. The Local Government Code of the Philippines stipulates that the political division shall enjoy a genuine and meaningful local autonomy to enable them to attain their fullest development as self-reliant communities and make them more effective partners in the attainment of national goals. It is also the policy of the state to ensure that the accountability of local government units through the institution of effective uh, mechanisms where the local government units group themselves or consolidate or coordinate their efforts, services, and resources, which are commonly beneficial to them. These mechanisms are translated into engagement among constituents, and to local officials, state decisions are highly salient. So this is the statement of the problem. So as you can see, the decision making and problem solving or the production of and regulation of professional knowledge and activities concerned with professional credibility, relationship around issues of identity and authority are vital roles of our legislators to avoid miscommunication and misinterpretation. These facets of international discourse are vital to look into skills that are essential in government reforms or strengthen the democratic system of government and are very fundamental part of how a government system operates. For the purpose of the study, um, good governance straddles both supply and demand sides of governance by focusing on dynamic forces and mechanisms were investigated to establish questions and patterns of communicative interactions among participants. I also tried to investigate the politeness and apology strategies in the social interface process and the language alternation phenomenon um, following the rudiments in sessions procedure. Well, this study inevitably brought the attention of the barangay, the municipality, and provincial officials in the conduct of their regular sessions. Its main focus was on the manner by which the participants interacted in achieving institutional goals that will benefit the stakeholders, the institutions in general. So these are the research questions. As fundamental course of this research, the following questions were formulated. The first one is, how do Philippine local legislators interact during regular and special proceedings? What are the common adherences and statements in the proceedings? How do the discourse patterns and strategies utilized by the local legislators in the proceedings? And lastly, what hinders the local legislators in expressing their ideas during the proceedings? So, these are the theories used as structures to support these studies. I have quite a few. Austin, for speech acts, we have speech acts by Austin and Searle. Austin presented a new picture of analyzing meaning. And meaning is described in a relation among linguistic conventions correlated with words or sentences. The situation where the speaker actually says something to the hearer and associated intentions of the speaker. Searle refers to that statements as speech acts. He calls that one as speech acts. This speech act is the basic unit of language used to express meaning, an adherence that expresses an intention. And normally, the speech act is a sentence, but it can be a word or a phrase, as long as it follows the rules necessary to accomplish the intention. So when one speaks, one performs an act. Speech is not just used to designate something, it actually does something. Speech act stresses the intent of the act as a whole. And according to Searle, understanding the speaker's intention is very vital and essential to capture the meaning. So without the speaker's intention, it is impossible to understand the words of as like a speech act. And the second theory was the use is the pragmatics in discourse by Coulthard. Um, Pragmatics focuses on the effects of context on meaning, and discourse analysis studies written and spoken language in relation to its social context. Pragmatics in this sense can be defined as the language used in context. In discourse analysis and pragmatics, identify the function of the adherences and how they connect together to form um, coherent discourse tend to be viewed solely as purposive interventions in the world by individuals. So rather than merely transferring propositional content, it undoubtedly involves the expression of the speaker's stance, that is his point of view, his attitudes while saying something, his feelings and evaluations relating to the proposition. So in addition, uh, it also requires a consideration of how speakers organize what they want to say in accordance with who they're talking to, where, when, and under what circumstance. Another theory used is the implicatures of conversational maxims by Grice. I'm sorry. Uh, okay. According to Grice, what a speaker means by an adherence can be divided into what the speaker says and what the speaker thereby implicates. Each adherence or statement can imply a proposition that is not found in the adherence or necessary consequence of the adherence, or what we call implicatures. Each adherence, according to him, is can raise more than one or different implicatures um, in different contexts. The context of an utterance are governed by the cooperative principle stating that participants expect that each will make a conversational contribution such as is required. Like, for example, in this study, the regular session, so they're expected to talk, they're expected to share their point of view at a stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose of direction of the talk exchange. So according to Grice, there are four conversational maxims of quantity, quality, relation, and manner. I will be discussing that one as we go along. And um, uh, this study is basically also focused on how is CDA, or critical discourse analysis by Fairclough, was utilized. CDA studies the exertion of political, social, and economic power relations through the speech or the text. CDA is inspired and restricted attempt to analyze how language is used not only to describe the things but also to do things. It studies the language in relation to supremacy, civilization. In other words, the main focus of discourse analysis is the social use of language. How is language used in the social context? So, um, so in research design, discourse analysis is specifically critical discourse analysis of Fairclough's three-dimensional model was used in this study. CDA is an interdisciplinary approach to the study of discourse that views language as a form of social practice. According to Norman Fairclough, he assumes that any form of language is a communicative event. Fairclough says that CDA is a kind of discourse analysis that creates strange relationship between different social and cultural groups. According to him, there are three stages of discourse analysis. So the first stage, as you can see, is related with analyzing the beliefs of the authors or speakers of the text or talks. Text, by the way, is not just what is written. Text can be writing, speech, images, or a mixture of three forms of communication. We call this analysis as a word level. In the description stage, linguistic features such as choice in vocabulary, grammar, and text structure, or some would look up into the thematic choice, in this case, the turn-taking system, should be systematically analyzed. This is the first step in which the text is the object. For Fairclough, description, this stage is concerned with formal properties of the text. In other words, linguistic features of the text are to be explored in the descriptive stage. The second stage is discursive or practice stage. The second stage guides how discourse has an influence on society. Discursive practice or interpretation involves production of text or constitutional text. In other words, this step deals with the exploration of intertextual relations among discourse, text, and setting. That is, the discourse should not only be considered as the linguistic version, but also a kind of discursive practice. Here, the analysis takes place at the text level. Interpretation is concerned with the relationship between text and interaction with seeing the text as a product of a process of or production and as a recourse in the process of interpretation. In the interpretation stage, the relationship between the discourse and its production and its consumption should be interpreted. Besides, discourse is not only regarded as text, but also a discursive practice in this stage, which means apart from analyzing linguistic features and text structures, attention should also be drawn to other factors such as speech act and intertextuality. So these factors link the text to its context. And the third phase of CDA is about social practice, studying individuality and practicality. It is about the standards of the society or the organization, in effect, social structures. Here is the analysis of what we call the norm level. According to Fairclough, explanation is concerned with the relationship between interaction and social context with the social determination of the process of production and interpretation and their social effects. On the other hand, the analysis in explanative parts is in reference to the historical, social, and cultural context. So, in general, according to Fairclough, the purpose of conducting the discourse analysis is to highlight and understand the said belief system and to know how they are expressed and communicated to the public in general. Fairclough says that the idea of common sense is developed and put into the minds of common people through tactful use of the language. So for the research setting, I am from Caraga region. So Caraga region, or the designated region 13, occupies which occupies the northern section of the island of Mindanao. Just a little background: the word Caraga originated from the Visayan word Kalagan. Kalag means soul or people, and An means land. The Kalagans has a long history of being brave and fearless. Thus, our region, Region 13, was called by an early chronicler as the land of the brave and fierce people. So for this study, I chose one province, one municipality, and one barangay in Caraga region, Mindanao, Philippines. For the sample and sampling procedure, a purposive sample, also referred to as a judgment, I think you know this, or expert sample, was used to produce a sample that can be logically assumed to be representative of the population. In this case, or in this study, the barangay, municipal, and provincial members were chosen as participants of this research. For the data collection, the first requirement was they must be willing to participate. And the second one is that in the members of the Sangguniang Panlalawigan, which is composed of the elected members, ex officio members, and the members of representing the reserved seat for certain sectors, the provincial vice governor, who serves as the presiding officer, and then we have also the members of the Sangguniang Panglungsod, or the municipal level, which is composed of the vice mayor, who is the presiding officer, the regular Sangguniang member, the president of the municipal chapter of the League of the Barangay, the president of the Panlungsod na Federasyon ng Sangguniang Kabataan, or the SK Federation, and the member of the Barangay Council, which is composed of the barangay captain, or the village chief executive, and comprises the 7 members, or the kagawad, we call them the barangay councilors, and the chairman of the Sangguniang Kabataan, or the Barangay Youth Council. So these are the participants in the study. So what are the data collection methods employed in the study? In gathering and analyzing specific information, depth of understanding to raw data, and evaluation, and evaluate the results by following these methods. Methods were used. The first one is recorded proceedings, observation, documents, which includes minutes of proceedings, evidence, and reports of committees, focus group discussion, and of course literature for related studies. So for the data analysis framework that is used in the study, based on the theories that I mentioned a while ago that constitute the framework of the study, the data used came from the transcripts of the actual regular sessions, 13th regular session of the Sangguniang Barangay, the second regular session of the Sangguniang Bayan, and the first inaugural session of the 15th Sangguniang Panlalawigan. Subsequent analysis mainly focus on the implicatures in the adherences or statements, conversational maxims, and the implicatures, and the illocutionary speech acts in the adherences. Another thing is the good quality audio recordings, or the verbatim word-for-word transcription of the interview were also used. Becoming familiar with the whole interview using the audio recording, transcript, and contextual or reflective notes that were recorded was also a vital stage in the interpretation. After the familiarization, the researcher carefully read the transcript line by line, applying label of codes, and codes were grouped together into categories which are then clearly defined. So for the analysis of the data, I used 4 phases, the phase 1 up until phase 4. The first one is the implicatures of the adherences analysis, and in this phase, adherences from different speakers were carefully chosen. Only adherents or statements that have propositions that can raise one or more different implicatures if uttered in different contexts were included in the samples. In phase 2, conversational maxims based on the content of the implicatures analysis, the conversational maxims based on the content of the implicatures analysis. In this phase, implicatures which conveys, implies, or suggests without directly expressing are chosen according to the 4 conversational maxims. So what are these maxims? Maxim of quantity, where one tries to be as informative as one possibly can and give as much information as needed and no more during regular session. The maxim of quality, where one tries to be truthful and not give information that is false or that is not supported by evidence. the maxim of relation, where one tries to be relevant and says things that are pertinent to the discussion, and the maxim of manner, where one tries to be as clear, as brief, and as orderly as one can in what he says, and where one avoids obscurity and ambiguity. The phase three is the locutionary speech acts in the adherences analysis. Uh, in this phase, sentences from different sessions were extracted. These sentences containing referring expressions like noun phrase and predicating expressions like verb phrases to express propositions um, were included. And in the phase four, illocutionary speech act in adherences analysis, in this phase, sentences from different sessions were extracted. These sentences are classified as to the following. Under each classification, it can be analyzed as to what specific speech act verb was used. So, as you can see in the slide, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 types. From when you say representative, where one describes a state of affair, he could probably state, deny, assert, agree, inform, assure, conclude or report, predict, claim or remind. Okay, these are some of the the verbs which is used to describe how a particular individual try to express his thoughts or his statement. Then when you say directive, when one try to get the hearer to do something, it could be requesting, suggesting, questioning, asking, begging, or ordering. And when you say, of course, question, when one tries to get the hearer to provide some information. When you say commissive, when one tries to commit to the speaker to do something, it could be offering, committing, promising, or rejecting. uh, and when you say expressive, when one tries to express the emotional state of the speaker, like when he is surprised, he shows he likes something, fear, apology, thankful, regretful, or like he is in a mood where he wants to praise someone. Okay, and declaration, to change the status of some entity, like cursing, announcing, or declaring, or defining. So these are the, as you can see, data analysis framework that were used in the study. So it is very important that um, as researchers, we should be able to establish certain criteria to know that our research is really trustworthy. To establish credibility, there was a comprehensive, trustworthy, and sensible explanation of the data, reflexivity to provide more effective and impartial analysis as an educator, because I am not into the politics. I see it from the perspective of an educator and a researcher. And to establish transferability, there was a relevance of concepts and findings to other settings. To establish dependability, uh, there was a coherence between methods and findings, and transparency and auditable research process. Audit trails are the manual or electronic records that catalogs all the procedures that I have made or used in the study. And when you say confirmability, these are the findings and interpretation that really reflects the views of the participants. So for ethical considerations, these are the things that I have put into consideration. As researchers, we are bound by rules of ethics. So for approval and permission, the researcher, I communicated with and verified the cooperation between the office, different offices. And for voluntary participation, there was a voluntary informed consent, where the persons involved were of legal capacity to give consent without any intervention of any element or force. Participant safety, research participants were provided with everything they need to know about the study to make an informed decision about participating in the research. And they also made known to the nature, the duration, and the purpose of the study. And for my safety, the research safety, that's one thing that we have to put into consideration as well. Informing someone, I inform somebody where am I going and what time I'm going to return. I also inform the participants of the schedule FGD and or if I'm going to attend a session. And confidentiality, researcher only report the aggregate findings, not the individual level data to the public. And I just mentioned the province, not really the specific name of the province or the municipality or the barangay. And for data reporting, results were given and presented after, okay, for confirmation. And for the relevance of data, okay, the collected data play a vital role in supplying objective information for the problem under the study for some analytical understanding of the problems. Hence, a solution can be obtained. And so let's start to go to the presentation of the findings. What did I find out? So for the first question, how do Philippine local legislators interact during regular and special proceedings? The data shows that the exchange from the provincial, municipal, and barangay level sessions were distinct utterances and statements, extracts, which illustrates the importance in the understanding of meaning. Further, it was found out that fundamental differences of different sessions reflect the fact that what a sentence implies depends on the semantic content. What a speaker implies is a matter of his communicative intention in uttering the sentence. This is why in different situations, one can utter a given an ambiguous sentence and implicate different things. So based on the extracts, only the municipal level has one direct implicature, unlike the lengthy conversations of the provincial and the barangay levels that have examples which show at least more than one implicature. Okay. For second question, what are the common utterances and statements in the proceedings? In the study, the speakers did one of the four things as regard the cooperative principle and maxims. The speakers observed the maxims like what is shown in all given examples. The speakers uses phrases that eliminate or mitigate the effect of maxims and signals this to the addressee. The flouting of the maxims is different from the violation of the maxims because it occurs when the hearer really does not understand with the violated utterances, while the flouting of maxims occurs when the speaker intentionally stops to use the maxim to flatter the hearer to deduce the meaning named implicature. And in the study, it is also revealed that when the participants utter something by virtue of saying something, they are also providing information or informational content in expressing the truth. In the extracts, majority of the nouns are preceded by the definite article the, wherein the speaker believes that the listener already knows what he is referring to. Other extracts has pronoun as the head word like ours, this, and any. The verb phrases show that at least one verb and its dependents or object complements and other modifiers. In the extracts, auxiliary verbs shall, will, or modal auxiliary shall, will, and would, conjunction that, and linking verb is were also found to be a number in the extracts. In the last phase, sentences from different sessions are extracted. These sentences were classified and analyzed as to what specific speech act verb used. So representative, directive, question, commissive, expressive, and declaration. The data reveal that all these sessions have extracted samples from each classification, except in barangay session where there are no extractions for commissive and expressive classifications. So in the third question, how do discourse patterns and strategies utilized by the local legislators in the proceedings? Uh, Participants in discourse, they share information, stances, and knowledge in varying degrees, relevant um, connections, and express their ideas clearly. The interaction between participants observing institutional orders and discourse is visible as they are speaking with their equals and to the individual that is of higher rank, which in this case refers to the presiding officer, could be the vice governor, the vice mayor, or the barangay kapitan or barangay captain, while also following the maxims of conversational implicatures. This is to help uh, and this also includes norms, okay, uh, of interactions such as turn taking, social constant social relations to roles, our asymmetrical power relationship, or the decision making and problem solving um, skills. Okay, the production of and regulation of professional knowledge and activities concerned with professional credibility, role relationship, and issues of identity and authority. So, uh, uh, institutional discourse differed from ordinary conversation in different ways. Like they differ in the goal orientation, constraints, and even in framework. So, um, for the fourth question, what hinders the local legislators in expressing their ideas during the proceedings? So the speakers avoid the strategy since a direct response to an indirect strategy may provoke miscommunication or like misunderstanding or like in luckily there's no argument, so the hearer either accepts the strategy proposed by the speaker through direct like direct question and direct answer, or it could be indirect question and indirect answer, or he decides to make his contribution less straight and therefore gives preference to indirectness. Participants are also well aware of the fact that some information cannot or should not be expressed explicitly or directly, and that indirect strategy should be applied. Indirectness, I can say, plays a vital role in the communication. There are cases where the hearer fails to recognize the speaker's intention and he therefore wrongly interprets the speaker's utterance. And this misunderstanding may lead to funny situations, and hence it is often an unfailing source of clarification in sometimes joke during the session. So the application of CDA in the study for following the three levels. For text, we already know that text, whether written or spoken, or representation of language in images, movements, or sounds, are the key raw materials out of which specific discourses understood as bounded, sometimes strictly so ways of representation. The text used in the session provided the researcher with insights into language, good description of the structure, events, practices, social networks, and relation between and among the member of the body, between and among the institution, and between the institution and the people. Thus, language provides insights into discourse. In the interaction level, critical analysis of how language is used in social interaction and how language influences social relations and practices. At this level, an interpretation of discursive practices in relation to regular sessions, orders of discourse, practices and the power relation between officials in a session are undertaken. It is also at this level that moments such as action, interaction, social relation beliefs, attitudes, values, or even desires are taken into consideration in relation to the text production, uh, distribution, transformation, and consumption to a certain possible social injustice in or over the discourse. And then the last part in the context or the explanation at this level, um, the process helped the researcher identify and understand and explain the causal and circular logic at work, how and why discourses shape beliefs and stance as to regulate practices of their institution, and then eventually explain the interaction between social cultural context and the production and consumption of texts. So in conclusion, I'm almost done. Local officials try to accomplish the aims of the respective institutions. Interactions between participants were seen, subscribing to the theories of pragmatics, implicatures, and speech acts. Verbal exchanges were characterized by an orderly, socialized, and synergistic interaction of proposition brought during the flow of conversation. Although at some point, construction of meaning and comprehension were not guided by the rules of grammar, I think that is kind of expected in considerable amount. Context and contextual and paralinguistic factors were greatly considered. And the transcripts also suggest that the more participants engage in conversation, the more they will get their desired answers and goals. So for recommendation, what's in it for me? Special regular sessions for political leaders should be invigorated to critically examine a form of institutional discourse in which they are regular and active participants to promote their own ideas. Experience reveals that participants often find it enlightening to analyze the conventions they follow in the rudiments of parliamentary procedure, for example. Such analysis leads them to a critical understanding of implicatures to the traditional requirement for objectivity to constitute legitimate knowledge in this form of discourse. And another thing is encourage the political leaders to benefit from the opportunity to undertake comparative analysis on the role of conversational maxims, implicatures during municipal and barangay session. Contrasting political point of views brings an understanding to their power to be used in authentic and responsible manner. And of course, as an educator, as a teacher, um, this study I could be used like students can be stimulated to build a mini corpus of data to collect and to analyze examples of particular discourse um, constructed in an array of diverse contexts, like, for example, the language of political manifestos, campaign speeches, and televised debates, focusing on the locutionary speech acts. Especially with this new normal, I think this is also probably an interesting field to look into. And through this, students can be led to an understanding of how being engaged in discourse, which shapes the way they construct themselves and their relationship with others. And um, lastly, in classroom setting, we can incorporate in class discussions the set of methods that draw upon different approaches. And so it will lead the students to understand of the interrelationship and tensions between different ways of looking and interpreting a text. I hope I was able to share something this evening. Thank you, and God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amyll, for interesting presentation. To me, it was the first time to hear this discourse analysis. You see, Discourse analysis, I think it's the closest to the area of theology. I heard it many times from my other theologian colleagues who are doing exegesis of the Bible. But this is very interesting insight, and I would like to ask some, one more general question. I'm not an expert in discourse analysis, but it's interesting why you chose discourse analysis and not, let's say, a rhetorical analysis, which aims to show how and why a text has a particular effects on its audience. So just maybe a brief overview of why discourse and not rhetorical. Thank you.
As a researcher, in the statement of the problem, I just focus on the effective communication. So I was curious on how how the effective communication affect the essential, or how it affects in the government reforms, and how it strengthens the democratic system of the government and how it operates. I was curious on the exchange of these officials during the session. So that is why
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I see rhetorical analysis is more narrow. Discourse analysis allows you to see a bigger picture, a wider context, including socio-political factors, which are very important. Yeah, rhetorical is only focuses on the speech itself in itself. Yeah, thank you so much.
Dr. Pavel, we have 4 minutes.
Okay. We have several questions from our attendees, and we would like to give time to Dr. David to display some of them.
Yes, I don't think we can go through most of them because we have like 15 questions, but let's go through them one by one. And as usual, if Dr. Arceli stopped us, then we stop. Okay, so this is the first one. What language were the proceedings done?
Which procedures were done?
Yeah, maybe. If they were done in the dialect, how did you ensure that the intent and meaning were preserved?
Okay. For the provincial level, I was lucky enough that they use provincial and municipal level. I was lucky enough that they use English in the entire session. For the barangay, they use Visayan. So what I did, I recorded it and I transcribed it, and I seek the help of of people who are also into research, in this kind of research, to be able to double check. And then right after that, as after translating, I also went back to the session to ensure that they also agree to the translation that I made during the session.
Dr. David, by the way, we have participants here who are raising their hands. I would like to encourage you to write instead your questions in the Q&A box. That way, we will be able to save our time. We want to answer as many questions as we can. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, just to add, if you feel that your question won't be answered now, maybe Dr. Olano can answer them on using emails. So just ask the questions, and the ones that we cannot answer now, she will answer later. So yes, this is the second question. The barangay, municipal, and provincial level of local government may deal different issues depending on their mandate. Also, the level of formality becomes more evident as you go to higher levels. May I know if these factors affect your results and analysis? Also, does your presence not affect the attitude and behavior of your participants?
Okay. That's a very good question, actually. They have different issues, but I just focused on how they interact with each other. It is already given that they have different issues, or they tackle different issues, institutional issues. Um, if these factors affect the results analysis, and if my presence affect their attitude, actually when I use recording, and during the research, I was introduced to the group, so I could really sense somehow that my presence affect the attitude of the participants. However, initially, like I think a minute or two, because of my presence, they're not used to somebody who is really observing their sessions. That is not part of the body. But as they go along, I've observed that I I just sit in the corner just to make sure that I don't disrupt and I don't influence the flow of the discussion. So I was able to achieve somehow the objectives of my research. But as to the question, if it affects the attitude and behavior, initially it did, but as they go along, I would say I am confident that it did not affect the results at all.
Thank you very much. How would you describe the participants' social engagement and its influence on transparency in local governance?
Thank you for this question. Actually, it's quite interesting that in barangay, in provincial, provincial level, I can really say that, the pacing is fast. like like if one participant will say a statement, the other will respond right away. But in municipal and barangay level, there's some sort of used to the kind of um, flow, meaning the pace is so slow, and if somebody if the presiding officer would ask, are there any objections, or most of them will just agree. They don't really try to say something that or express their thoughts that that quite well, probably because they also agree to the idea. But unlike the provincial level, that their engagement is quite interesting. So that is why when I was able to get the results, I and I was very happy, by the way, that one of the results of this study, when I gave them the result of the study, the provincial level hold special sessions, rudiment sessions for special sessions for municipal level and barangay level on how to properly conduct uh, sessions. So I was thankful for that.
Okay, I'm sorry. It is now 7:03 in my timepiece, and we have to end. As we said, the other questions here, we will, I mean, you are going to take, I mean, keep these questions, David, right? And send to
Yes,
Dr.
yes,
Olano, so that
yes,
Dr.
yes.
Olano, uh, by the way, Dr. Olano, we will also send you the email addresses, or you can find them also in Facebook. So we would like to thank everybody for joining us during the AQRA Virtual Conference 5.5. And we are very grateful to our resource speakers today, Dr. Christian Stroeck, who gave us a glimpse of case study, but actually focusing on tribal communities, and also to Dr. Amyll Olano. And this is the first time that we had a taste of discourse analysis. We'll have some more.